gentlemen, and welcome to yet another fantastic educational piece from the Bushy community. 94 screens on this evening. It's absolutely, I always get gobsmacked at how incredibly connected all of you are, and whether you're local in the community or tuning in from further afield, it means so much to us that you're supporting our programs. But this is one of those evenings that really does sell itself. My personal connection to the British Museum goes back a little while. Even before I met Jacqueline, I already become an Anglophile and had spent time traveling around the UK, Scotland, as you could possibly imagine, but also London as well. And one of the first places I visited was the British Museum, as it is the epicenter of culture, really, and throughout the world, and looked up to in so many ways. I went there again when dating Jacqueline as well. And it's a good thing that we're focusing on one another. So hopefully I'll still be able to get something out of this tour, as we didn't see many of the exhibits that were probably there. More recently, Bushy had the pleasure of going with Raphi, with Rabbi Dr. Raphi Zarum, on a tour of the British Museum for Purim. And therefore, I've already had a bit of a taste, a bit of an experience of how integral for understanding the Purim story, of living the Purim story, of living our Yiddishkeit, is this type of evening and this type of experience. And this is exactly what Raphi does. As we all know, he brings Torah into the 21st century. He makes it relevant. He makes it meaningful. He makes our Yiddishkeit meaningful to us, and uplifts us and raises us up in our maturity of connecting with Hashem, with our faith, and just as developed people as well. So I'm not going to take the limelight any further. This evening really is just so exciting. It is a great pleasure and to welcome our friend back to the community. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so thrilled and proud to invite us all to hear from Rabbi Dr. Raphi Zarum. Raphi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rav Elchanan. And we share much, but the main thing we share is both our wives are called Jacqueline. And we're both very, very lucky people. So that's a great connection that we have. And I look forward to visiting Bushy in person, please God. And remind me at the end about the Pesach thing. If we do at the end, we'll maybe mention that at the end. So hello, everybody. Mishenichnas Adar Marbin Besimcha. When the month of Adar comes in, we increase our joy. And it doesn't say when Adar begins, it says Mishenichnas, when we come into it. I think a good translation of Mishenichnas is when we anticipate, we get excited about Purim, because it's fun. And even though this year it's going to be difficult and challenging, as I've heard from you, you're going to find ways to enjoy and make it meaningful. So if we get to visit the British Museum tonight and that gets you in the mood for Purim, then l'chaim to you. So let's begin. And as always, I'd like to welcome you immediately by just taking us to the front of the museum. Here we are. This is the front of the British Museum. You can see it straight away there. Let's look up. You can all see that? Yeah, just nod so I can see you're seeing that. Good. And if I rotate over here, let me just pan out a bit just to make sure I'm really panned out. Yeah, there we go. So just to show you here how it's going to work, I can actually rotate and you can see this is the outside of the museum. It's quite quiet because they filmed this really early in the morning. And it's light there. It's light in London, although it's dark in Bushy. So let's go around here. We can actually go into the museum and actually walk around it on tour as we go. So as we enter in over here, here's the little place where you can drop in money. And when you visit the museum, even though it's free, it's a great privilege to have it, as the rabbi said. So drop in a bit of money next time you visit. And we come in here to what is known as the Great Hall over here, this amazing hall that was done up. You see this beautiful ceiling of glass that was put together in the year 2000. It's a wonderful one. We're going to visit lots of things in this museum, as I'll show you. Before we go on, let me just show you a little bit of my handout. We're going to try and do an hour tonight, an hour or so, and look at three basic themes of the Megillah. Let me just show you the handout very briefly. You can see it over here. And what we're going to try and look at is understanding, is Purim just like a fairy story of good and evil for kids, or is there something more to it? We're going to say the Al Anissim special prayer in our prayers over Purim, and it talks about Mordechai and Esther. Are they real people? And Shushan, where the hell's that? That's a funny name for a place. And the whole attack of the Jewish people and King Achashverosh. Was there really a person called Achashverosh? In English, you say Ahasuerus. Can't even pronounce it properly. He's not mentioned anywhere in anything. So is this stuff made up? Is this real? Or what's it all about? So we're going to look at three things tonight. I've tried to make it as clear as possible. We're going to look at the setting of the story, the Persian Empire, and who the identity of Ahasuerus was, the power, the structure of the power of the empire, of the Persian Empire, and how it was different, and how the Megillah deals with it, and the central role of the palace, because the palace is a real place. The word Shushan is the Hebrew name for it. The Greek name for it is Susa, and they dug it up. They dug up Susa in 1971, and thanks to the wonderful LSJS, I got to buy the book. Look at this, The Palace of Darius at Susa. It's a big, thick book, not cheap. I got money, but they managed to get it, and it's the description of the entire palace, the whole issues. Now it's been raised to the ground, but the foundations are so deep they go like 10 foot underground because of the water flowing and all that kind of stuff. The drains, they can reconstruct what the palace looked like, the real palace of Shusha. And I have a dream, by the way, one day that we will actually go there at night and perform a Megillah reading in the palace, as I'll show you. Anyway, but let's look at our first object in the museum that I want to go to. And again, the way it works in the museum, we're going to jump around. I can't take you on the stairs. So I'm going to imagine we went up those stairs and I took you into room 52. And if I took you upstairs to room 52, you'd end up over here. This is the room 52. You can see it's over here. That's what it's called, room 52. This is ancient Persia. And in the middle is a very, very important object. And let's see, you can write in the chat if any of you recognize what that object is. Let me go in a bit closer. Right in the middle here, it's in this glass case. It's over here. I'm putting my mouse around it. Can anybody write in the chat what you think that is? Feel free to do it, even if someone else has. If you know, you write in the chat. I'll go in closer, and I'll go in even closer. What is this object? Very important for Jewish history, what this object is. Well, I can't go closer. If I can pan out. So some of you in the chat, if I can pan out and go and stand a bit closer to it. Yeah, let's stand over here. Or even over here, actually. And I'll rotate around over here. This is a very important room. There's lots of stuff from Shushan and from Persia in general over here. What is this object I'm looking at over here? It's a side view of it. Anybody know? You see, it's like a cylinder with writing on it. What have you got in the chat over here? I've got two people in the chat. You've written, it's a scroll. Now, the Rosetta, you think Rosetta Stone, because Rosetta Stone was well known as a very famous translation of hieroglyphics, but that's not what it is. It's not a codex, it's a barrel of sorts, absolutely. It's a cylinder. Let's see if I can stand over here and look at it. Oh, I can stand on the other. No, I want to stand a bit further. I can only see where the crosses are. There you go. There's a nice cross over here. Where's that cross gone? If I can find it. Yeah. Oh. Let's see, it jumps around. There we go. Oh, no. I want that one. Sorry. This is difficult. If I was actually there, it wouldn't be so difficult, you know. But when you're actually watching it, you're limited. If I go over here. Yeah, okay. No. Sorry, sometimes this happens. It just goes funny. Okay, there we go. Now rotate upwards, giving you a bit of a headache now. Just keep that. Here it is. There we go. Now it's going closer. You can see it's got, and it's not hieroglyphic writing. It's got cuneiform writing on it. It's not the Megillah. It is called the Cyrus Cylinder. That's what it's called, the Cyrus Cylinder. It's a real scroll, and what's written on it, right? The Cyrus Cylinder. It's very important. It's original. It was dug up in Babylon, as we'll see. Look at my notes over here. You can see when it was dug up. Over here. Here's a picture of it. Up close. Here we go. The Cyrus Cylinder. It's made of cuneiform writing. Now, you've all heard of hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics is what the ancient Egyptians did. But the ancient Persians and Mesopotamians, Babylonians all wrote in something called cuneiform, which is what this writing is. And for those who can't read it, here's a translation of part of it. It was discovered, as I said, in 1879. And look at this. It actually was written in Akkadian. So cuneiform is a font, but actually the language was Akkadian. It was created, we know when it was because it says so, in 539 BCE. This is before the Purim story. It's made of baked clay. And in 1971, it was described as the world's first charter of human rights. That's how important it is, and I'll tell you why. It's translated into 6 official languages of the United Nations, and a replica of it can be found in New York City. Right? But the original is in the British Museum, although the Iranians would like it back. They borrowed it, but they can't. Now, why is it so important? So as you know, our temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. We went into exile. But the Babylonians were very quickly sorry, the Babylonians were very quickly wiped out by the Persians, who took over the entire region and conquered Israel and Egypt under Cyrus. And Cyrus wasn't like the Babylonians. The Babylonians mixed all the peoples around so they wouldn't rebel. What did Cyrus do? He said, you can all go home, and you can go home and you can rebuild your temples. He was very enlightened in many ways. Look what he wrote. He says, I am Cyrus, king of the world, the great king, king of Babylon, king of the four quarters of the world. I sought the safety of the city of Babylon and all its sanctuaries. As for the population of Babylon, I freed them from their servitude. Look at that. He stopped people being slaves. And all the kings who sit on thrones, from the Tigris to the Euphrates, who inhabit remote districts, who live in tents, they brought their tribute to me and kissed my feet. So they showed him respect, but then what did he do? I sent them back to their places. Shrines that were dilapidated, I made permanent sanctuaries for them. I collected together all their peoples and returned them to their settlements. He let them go home. And guess what? We Jews were exiled in Babylon. Remember, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat down, we wept. Remembered Zion? Right? Boney M sang it, but originally it's in our benching. It's Shea Malot. And we describe it over here. And Cyrus said, everyone can go home. And the Jews did. And that's why that cylinder that's in the British Museum that you just saw, a version of it effectively is in our book of Ezra. Look at the book of Ezra. How does the book of Ezra begin? It says, look, in the first year of King Cyrus, king of Persia, that's 538, right? He said, the Lord, as God has given me the kingdom of the earth and has told me, charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, in Judah, rebuild the temple, right? Any amongst you of his people, let his God be with him. Yehi Elohav imo. Right, let his God be with him and let them go back to Jerusalem. And Cyrus, let us go back and rebuild the temple. The book of Ezra describes what is there in the Cyrus cylinder. Same story, to go back and rebuild the temple. And that's the background to our story. Now, the Talmud debates when the Purim story happened. There is a theory that it happened while we were in exile. I'm going to argue, based on lots of opinions, that actually it happened after we came back. And I'll show you with just this brief one table over here, and then we'll look at more objects as well. This is a summary of the whole period. Basically, you've all heard of the Babylonians, right? They destroyed our temple 586. They were the main power in the earth. And after the Persians, there's the Greeks. You all know about that, Alexander the Great, conquering the known world. So there's the Greek Empire that starts 332 BCE, and there's the Babylonian Empire that was before. But in the middle, for 200 years, is the Persian Empire. When the British Museum did an exhibition about it, you know what they called the exhibition? The Forgotten Empire, because people didn't remember this important period. For 200 years, from about 550 BCE to 330, just over 200 years, the Persians were the main empire in the world. They conquered the entire region, the entire Mesopotamia, all of Babylon, all of Persia, all of Turkey, all the way as far as Greece, all the way through Israel. And Cambyses, Cyrus' son, conquers Egypt and gets crowned Pharaoh of Egypt. So they are the largest empire of its time. 10 million people, 2 million square miles. How do you run that size of a kingdom 2,500 years ago? That's our question. It's just incredible. How do you do it? How did they do it? And you can see right here, I'm going to say the Purim story takes place over here. The Jews have started coming back to Israel. They started rebuilding the temple, but a lot of them are still in exile. Ezra's story happens afterwards, and I'm going to argue the Purim story happens over here because of this king. But before I go into it, I need to prove that to you of who that king is. So that's the basic context of our story, and we now have to learn more. Who was this guy, Achashverosh? Right. So to do that, let's go back into the British Museum, and I will show you what Persian kings look like. So we were in room 52, and by the way, if I was doing this live with you, I wouldn't be able to jump around. So this is much better. Let's jump to the entrance again, and now let me take you to room 1. The Room of Enlightenment, because in that room are some ancient reliefs of Persians, and they've got a particular look, the Persians, right? The Egyptians, as you know, have those incredible wigs, and the look they have with the hieroglyphics. The Persians have a different look. Let me just get into this room. Okay, we're in the Enlightenment Room over here. Isn't this beautiful? This is George the III gave all this stuff to this in a beautiful room in the British Museum. There we go. Lots of objects from all over. That's what the British do. We find things all over the world and we nick it and bring it back to London. So look under here. Can you see over here in this case? I'll enlarge it now. This is a picture of what a Persian king would look like. There's Median soldiers on each side. But that is the king. Can you see that beard? That's called your Persian beard. Not so easy to do, by the way. Right? because I'm a bit of a geek and I look at these things, go on the internet, type in Persian beards, and there's these kind of, in New York City, these people try to invent them. It's quite difficult. You have to kind of lace beards together to do these kind of things. You've got your kind of hairnet bob thing at the back and the crown. This is your Persian type beard. And above here, you have a picture of King Darius, who was Cyrus, who was the one after King Cyrus. You can see over here, it's a bit difficult because of the glass, but that's what it's referring to over here. Now, why is that important? Right? Why are the Persians important? Let's go and see how the Megillah begins and see if we can work out who these people are. So how does the empire, the verse, you all know the famous first verse of the Megillah, right? So we say Achashverosh was the king, funny name Achashverosh, who reigned from Hodurad Kush, from India to Ethiopia, huge area, 127 provinces. Really? 127? Do we know that? Is that true? And who was this guy, Achashverosh? We know who Cyrus was. I told you earlier. Cyrus is mentioned. Look, you see, Cyrus is in the book of Ezra. Cyrus is translated as Koresh, by the way. Okay, that's Cyrus's Koresh. But after Cyrus, who's next? Well, if you go to the book of Ezra, and I've tried to simplify this for you, there are 4 kings it talks about in chapter 4. It talks about Koresh, who's Cyrus. Then it talks about Daryavesh, who we translate as Darius. By the way, Darius is the Greek name for him. Right? Cyrus is the Greek name. Koresh is the Hebrew name. The question is, my friends, what's the Persian name? Right? He didn't call himself Darius. That's Greek. And Daryavesh is the Hebrew name. What was the Greek name? That will help us. And the one after in Ezra of Darius is Xerxes, is Achashverosh. Is Achashverosh Xerxes? Because he's the next king. If we go back to our table over here, you can see the big kings were Cyrus, Darius. Cambyses was only for 2 years. Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes. And in the book of Ezra, it says Koresh, Daryavesh, Achashverosh, Artaxerxes. Right? Melech Plus, king of Persia. Are these Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes? Well, you know what? I can prove it. How can I prove what they are? Through this. Now, this is an amazing thing to look at. There's drawings of this in the British Museum in that case that I just showed you. Now, you all know about hieroglyphics. I'll do this very briefly. Hieroglyphics was translated because of the Rosetta Stone. You've seen it in the British Museum. Remember, the Rosetta Stone has hieroglyphics and it has Greek. Right? They found it in the 1800s in Rosetta, which is now Alexandria. Although I discovered recently, Rabbi, that there were Jews living in Alexandria at the time when that stone was written by, let me get this right, by Ptolemy II. Okay, it's just after they've had the Torah translated into Greek. So there's Jews who would have seen the Rosetta Stone and seen that translation. We were there. Alexandria is a multicultural society. Isn't that amazing? So the Rosetta Stone we see in the British Museum, our ancestors lived. Rosetta was just down the road to Alexandria, right? They would have seen that. They would have known it. Isn't that amazing? They would have known more about hieroglyphics than we do today. So it's just the issue. I know the Rob loves this stuff. So it's just an amazing thing when you think about it. Anyway, there was a program on In Our Time with Melvin Bragg 2 weeks ago on the Rosetta Stone. If you're interested in anybody, Thursday mornings, Radio 4, amazing stuff. Last week was Rosetta Stone with Melvin Bragg, absolutely fascinating. Anyway, the Rosetta Stone's amazing because it was in Greek written on the stone and in hieroglyphs, we could translate the hieroglyphs. But what about cuneiform? How can we translate this stuff? Well, you know who translated it? This is the guy, Sir Henry Rawlinson, in Behustan, north of in North Iran. They found a stone on the side of a mountain that also had multiple languages, and Greek and hieroglyphics, and they could translate it. So Sir Henry Rawlinson translated hieroglyphics a few years after they translated, sorry, he translated cuneiform, this kind of language, a few years after hieroglyphics was translated. And you know what, guys, you all know this, because if you're fans of Gilbert and Sullivan and Pirates of Penzance, remember that great song, Modern Major General? There's one line in it where it says he can translate a washboard, a Babylonian washboard in perfect cuneiform. Remember that line? Look it up. Why? What's that referring to? That song, he's a modern Major General. That was Major General Henry Rawlinson, right? Gilbert and Sullivan put in his discovery and his ability 20 years earlier into their musical. That's what it's referring to. And this is his own handwriting, handwritten copying down of cuneiform. And look what he writes underneath this. Can you see? It's in his own handwriting. Look at this. This says Daryavush. Daryavush is how you pronounce Darius in Persian. And Daryavush is very similar to the Hebrew way of Daryavesh. So the Persian name is actually nearer to the Hebrew than the Greek, because the Greeks couldn't say these words. They translated to Darius, but Daryavush is his real name. And who is his father? Here it is, Chashayash. Chashayash. That's his name. Chashayash is Achashverosh. The Greeks translated as Xerxes because they couldn't say Ch and Sh, right? I've got some notes about this over here. They couldn't pronounce it in that way. But Chashayasha is Achashverosh. That's what it's over here. Now you might say, why is there an A at the beginning? It starts with a Ch. Why do we do Achashverosh? Why not Chashverosh? Well, in Hebrew, you should know, when we translate a foreign word which starts off with two initial consonants, you add an aleph. Like Plato in Hebrew is Aplaton. Can you see? PL, two consonants. So the way you do it in Hebrew, because of just the way the language works, you add an aleph. Plato becomes Aplaton. Chashayasha becomes Achashverasha. And you say, what about the vavs? Achashverosh. Right? Why are there vavs there? Well, if you look at the Megillah, my friends, and look at the last chapter 10, there's no vavs. Achashverosh is spelt in 3 different ways in the Megillah. Sometimes with 2 vavs, verosh, sometimes with no vavs. So literally, it's the same word. Chashayasha is Achashverosh is Xerxes. And that means we know who he is. Because if it's Xerxes, we know all about him. And you know how we know? You know how we know? Because of these books. I'll show you. I'll unshare for a minute this book. Right, now I can't read Greek. Right, the rabbis in the old college could, but this is called Herodotus the Histories. Remember the first historian Herodotus, written less than 100 years after the Purim story, who knew all about the Persians. And chapter 7 is all about King Xerxes living in his palace in Susa. And if you buy the Persians, like £5 on Amazon, right, and you read chapter 7, once you've read the Megillah, your mouth will drop, because the way he describes the Persians is exactly like the Megillah, as I'll show you. So we know it's talking about Xerxes. Now look at this. Once we know that Xerxes, and this is either Darius, his father, who also conquered, but now look, see if you get this. Look what's to the left and to the right. To the left of Xerxes, we have Indian-looking statues. And to the right of Xerxes, what do we have? Do you recognize that? That's Egyptian stuff. That's interesting. Why would we have on one side Indian stuff, which we'd say in Hebrew Hodu, and on the other side we say Egyptian stuff? And Egypt, what's just below Egypt? Ethiopia, or in Hebrew, Cush. Look on the wall over here. We do it again, right down here. I'm just going to just stir for you. We have again, here's a picture of Darius now holding a spear with his soldiers. Look at that. Here's Darius holding it. Now, who's above him? Above him on one side, we have Osiris, an Egyptian god from Egypt, which is on the western border of his kingdom. And next to it, more Indian stuff. We have Mehodu ad Kush in the British Museum. You following that? Let me show you on the handouts. That makes more sense to you. Remember we said the verses, he reigned from Hodu ad Kush. We said it over here. He reigned from India to Persia. So look, the British Museum lays it out in the same way. What are the chances? But they do, because that was the size of his kingdom. Let's see if I've got a picture of his kingdom. Here we go. Yes. And by the way, was it really 127? Right? Because we actually know that there were satrapies, which he conquered. Satrapies was regions. And actually there were 20 of them. So why does it say 127? So look what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, it doesn't say 127. It says Sheva, ve'esrim, ve'mea, 7 and 20 and 100. Rav Chisda Amar, betchila malach al Sheva. Originally he reigned over 7, Ulasof melech Asrim. Then he reigned over 20, Ulasof melech Amer. Then he was reigned over 100. It wasn't 127, it was cumulative. The 7 was part of the 20 was part of the 100. And there were 20 satrapies. So it's about being expansionist. And here's a nice map that describes it for you. Mehodu, can you see here the Indian River over here? Mehodu ad Kush, that's down here. This is the size of his reign. Look at it. Shushan is Susa, is a real place, a real palace, right over here. You've got Babylon over here, just to do you. You've got Israel over here. Maybe you've got a flat in Netanya, that's about over here. Right, there's Cyprus, Greek islands. Please God, one day we'll get to go to our Greek islands and visit over here. Right, and there's the Aegean. So you see that his empire went right to the edge and bumped into the Greeks over here. Right, you can see that. That's the side of his kingdom. Now, what's amazing is, and this is not in the British Museum, but I'll show you as well, is this picture over here. When they dug up another palace. Let me just show the map again. Xerxes had a number of palaces. He had a palace in Shushan, and a palace in Persepolis, and a palace in Ecbatana, and a palace in Babylon. He would travel around these palaces. And when they dug up the palace in Persepolis, which is very much like Susa, they found these plates inside it. And what do they say? They say, Darius, Xerxes' father, king of kings, the kingdom which I have goes from Saki, which is beyond Sogdiana, as far as Cush, from Indus, as far as Sardis. Right, that's the size of his kingdom. Now, I'm going to take those words and draw them on our map above. And this is the wonder of Zoom. See if I can make this work. What you do is you go into annotate and you press draw and you choose a color. Right, I'll do, what shall I do? I'll do dark blue. Now I'll read the text. The text says that Darius himself says, I was a king from Saki, which is on Sogdiana, that's over here, all the way to Cush, right? That's what he says. I was a king from here to here. And then he says, and I was also one from Sardis, that's here, the very edge in Greece, Sardis, all the way, so from Indus to Sardis. So Indus River's over here, all the way to here. Can you see what he's drawing? He says, that's my kingdom, from here to here, and from here to here. Why describe it like that? As I always say, it's like your television screen. How big is your television screen? 50-inch? That's not the vertical or the horizontal, it's the diagonal. That defines the size of your kingdom. That's what he's doing. But what's interesting is, what's the bottom end of his four? The bottom end is Mehodu, India, Ad Kush. It's the same as described. Now, why does Armageddon not mention the top two? Because they're not important. They're not in the Bible. Right? We weren't interested in Thrace and Saki in the Bible. We're interested in the bottom two. Do you know what that means? That means, let me just clear that. That means that not only does the British Museum say that the extent of his kingdom is the same as in the Megillah, but the way of describing the extent of his kingdom is the same in the Megillah. That's how accurate the Megillah is. The person who wrote the Megillah, traditionally either Mordechai or slightly later, was well versed in the culture and the statehood and the geography of the great kingdom that they had. That's what I wanted to show you. Okay, and that shows you his palace. Again, we said in those days when the king Ahasuerus sat in the palace at Shushan. Now, you always read this is the second verse. When the king sat on the throne that was in Shushan Palace. You read it as, oh, that's where the palace was. What it means is he traveled around. And this story takes place when he was Al Kisem Lakto Asher, the one that was in Shushan. Do you understand? There were lots of kingdoms. It's when he was in Shushan. He was in Shushan this time of year, always. Right? In the summer, he would go to Ecbatana to cool down, right? In the north. But at this point, he would be a king over here. Okay. Now, we want to go back into the museum. We'll leave what he was like. Just to mention, by the way, we know all about Xerxes because Herodotus, the history, and Aeschylus, Persians, tell you all about him. Now, the next thing I want to show you, so it's my alarm going, press snooze on that. The next thing I want to go back into the museum, and do you want to see what Ahasuerus looked like? Do you want to actually see what he looked like? Because he's in the museum. Let me show you. I never forget when I was there once, and there was these ultra-Orthodox Jews from Israel who were really lost in Israel, and they didn't know what anything was, and they were just walking around. I went up, I said, Atem yodim mishu po? Atem yodim mi po? Which means, do you know who's here? Lo. I said, Tireh. Zeh Achashverosh. And they went, Be'emet? I said, Ken, Zehu. And these guys are like, they know their Megillah. They were in shock. Here he is. This is Xerxes sitting on his throne. It's on the stairway. Okay. I'm doing the best I can to scan in on it. Here we go. Here he is. Can you see him there? He's got a servant behind him waving a fan to keep him cool. And he's got a long scepter in his hand and holding a lotus flower, a sign of peace. Okay. And what's underneath him? Right, that's him up close. Can you see? And look what's underneath. Here's the pillars. Look at this. There's all these people holding up, as it were, him. And not just one row, lots of rows, row after row of people holding him up. And they're all different. Look at their outfits. Look, that one's got culottes on. That one's got a long wrap. That one's got a tighter wrap. That's got kind of a more of a short skirt. And each one of their hairdos is different. It's a way of symbolizing all the different nations that held up the Persian Empire, the unification of the empire. Do you get it? That's what this picture is. And if we go to that in the British Museum, if we go now to the handout over here, you can see it over here. This is it, right? And this was found in the palace in Persepolis, right? Setting about 450 BCE. This is talking about Xerxes on his throne with row after row of people he was in charge of. And by the way, now you understand, what's he holding in his hand? A scepter. When you go to other rooms in the British Museum, Pharaoh is not holding a scepter, right? The Assyrians aren't holding a scepter. Only Xerxes has a scepter. You know why? Because it's in the Megillah. Remember that bit? When Mordechai says to Esther, you got to go to the king. She goes, I can't go to the king. Whoever goes to the king is not invited. They're put to death. Look at this. Look what it says. Let me just move you guys down to here. Right? It says, Lahamit, that anyone who goes to the king dies unless Levad, unless Me'asher Yoshit Lo Hamelech et Shavit Hazahav, unless the king puts out his golden scepter, and then they may live. Right? And so that's what she does when she builds up the guts to go to him. And she stands there very nervous. And what happens? And king put out his scepter to Esther in his hand, and Esther could go and talk to the king. That's when she invites him to his parties. So look, the Megillah, the only Shavit, my friends, well, there's one actually, rather, but the main place where Shavit is mentioned in Tanakh is in the book of Esther. And lo and behold, in the British Museum, the only big guy with a scepter is Achashverosh. Right? It's a sign of his power right there in the British Museum. But we can do more, because look at this. And this I will really get you on, okay? You all know the story at the beginning, right? With Vashti, you know, they have this big party and she won't come to the king, and therefore the king has her killed and therefore wants to get married. Now, when did that happen? When was that party? Well, we know. It says so in chapter 1. Look at this. It was in the 3rd year, Bishnat Shoshim Achor, right? Asam Mishteh. He does a big party. By the way, notice who he does the party for. Not just his servants, but all the military power of Persia and Media. There were lots of generals there. Why were there generals at the party? Now that's chapter 1. You all know what happens. And then you have the whole beauty pageant, and Esther gets chosen. But when did Esther marry the king? You'd say, well, it was the 3rd year that the banquet happened. Must have been just a year after that. But the Megillah says no. Megillah says no. Look at chapter 2. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in the 10th month, right? And Tevet in the 7th year of his reign. By Yasem Ketem Malchut B'Rosha V'Mlacha Tachat Vashti, right? And in the 7th year, Esther had the crown put on her head, and she replaced Vashti. Have you ever noticed that? Why is chapter 1 in year 3? Took 4 years to find a wife. When you read the story, when kids do the play, it's the next scene, right? Beauty pageant. Why is there a 4-year gap? What's going on? Megillah doesn't explain it. What's going on in those 4 years? Well, we know. We pick up our book, The Histories and Persians, and we read it and parallel the life of Xerxes with the life of Ahasuerus, and we end up with this. And this is so cool. It just works perfectly. Let me show you. Xerxes comes to power, and what's happened, by the way, his father Darius had died, and the Egyptians had rebelled. Remember, he was crowned Pharaoh of Egypt, Darius's father, and the Egyptians had rebelled. So the Xerxes comes to power. The first thing he does is he puts down the rebellion in Egypt. Okay, and then what does he want to do? He wants to do what his father did: beat the Greeks, because his father Darius tried to fight the Greeks for years and lost. So Xerxes says, right, I'm going to build a new army. And in the 3rd year of his reign, he musters together the largest army ever known in the world. Right, it took 4 years to do it, from 1 to 3 over here. 1,700,000. This is all described in chapter 7 of the histories of Herodotus. Right, Persians, Medes, Scythians, Hyrans, Assyrians, Bactrians all turn up for a massive party. He gets them all drunk and he says, look, guys, we could beat the Greeks. We could be the greatest empire ever. That's what the party was at the beginning of the Megillah. It was a mustering party. That's why it says Chel Plosumadai, the military power. That's why they were there. And why was it 4 years till he married Esther? Well, obviously, look what it says, because he went for a battle. The battle took 3 years. He comes back in the 7th year. That's what Herodotus says. Xerxes returned despondent. He failed in the battle. You know, the Battle of Marathon, the origin of the word marathon, all that stuff, when he fights the Greeks and the Spartans, all that stuff that's described. You might have seen the movie The 300. That's what it's about. Xerxes is in that. Okay, and he fails, and he comes back. And you know what Herodotus says? He comes back and takes up with many women, because if he fails in the battlefield, he'll try and do well in the bedroom. And he marries a woman called a Mistis. Was that Queen Esther? But it works perfectly. The life of Xerxes, when you lay it up, see, look, I've got the Megillah over here, and Herodotus, it lines up perfectly, right? And he comes back from war, and there's no major events in his life in Herodotus, but we say the whole Megillah story takes place then. By the way, after Megillah is finished, Xerxes lived on after that. You know what happened in the 20th year of his reign? 8 years after the Megillah is finished, he was assassinated. You know that? He actually was in the end. And you know who assassinated him? A palace guard and a palace general. 2 men on the inside. Very similar to what actually happened in the Megillah, where there was an attempt of his life in chapter 2 with Bigtan and Teresh. So the person that wrote the Megillah knew the life of Xerxes. It's too similar not to be. Isn't that incredible? So we actually know that Xerxes is Ahasuerus, and the life described in Herodotus exactly fits. Now, in the last 20 minutes or so of our tour, I want to show you some more important things. All right, because the Rav said, keep showing them more things in the room. So let's go back into the room and I'll show you more stuff. So now you see, we know it's him, we know it's set it up, but let's understand a bit of the culture. Let's go back into room 52 and we can see over here about his life, and we can see soldiers. Look, these are Persian soldiers. Your Bigtan and Teresh, this is what they would have looked like, right? This is a special kind of tiles they would make on the sides of the palaces. You can see over here an example of that. And what I want to show you now, what should I show you next? I want to show you, yes, let me show you something which is really big in this room. And it's hard to, you've got to trust me on this. I mean, the Rav's been in the room with me. But you know what there's a lot of in this room, room 52? Let's go over here, just on this side. There's a lot of cups. And there seems to be a hell of a lot about drinking in this room. Let me show you over here. I'll just rotate it. Here we go. Look at this. Cup, bottle, cup, 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 cup. Special cornucopia of a cup. All these, and it says all these different drinking vessels the Persians would use. And the reason there's all different kinds is they conquered all these countries, and to make them feel at home, Xerxes would collect all the different kinds of cups from all over the world and have them for people to drink in his palace. You see these cups over here. Look at this beautiful one over here, right, with a kind of animal on the bottom of it. And there's for red wine and for white wine, all these different kind of bowls and cups described here. There's a lot of Greek ones as well, but there's a lot of Persian ones. And they say that the Persians like to drink, which fits really well with our Megillah story. If I scroll down over here, look at this. It says at the beginning of the Megillah, it says, the hashgot bichlei zahav, and they drank in this party, Jews as well, from vessels of gold, for kelim, mikelim shonim, all different kinds of designs. The yain malchut, rav keramelech, and the raw wine was in abundance, just as described in the British Museum. And more, and the Rav mentioned this earlier, what was the rule about drinking at the party? The hashdiya kadat, what was the, and the drinking rule was, ain't honest, there's no rules. Drink as much as you like. That was the order he gave. Everyone could do what they like. That's so unusual, by the way, in the ancient world. The ancient kings would control everything. Ahasuerus was the opposite. He says, have what you like. You know what it reminds me of? Starbucks. You walk into Starbucks, you go, I'd like a coffee. They go, what do you mean? I want a coffee. They go, right, grande, verde, right, you go, okay. You go, and I like milk. What kind of milk? Oats milk, goat milk, milk. What kind of coffee? These beans, those beans, all that kind of stuff. It's like 20 minutes. Just give me some coffee, right? Because you can have any kind that you want. And that makes you think, oh, Starbucks has what I want. That's the modern Western approach. Give people what they want. Anything on the menu, hundreds of choices. We'll make whatever you want. And that's what Ahasuerus did to calm everybody in his palace. Have what you like. But more than that, let's look at this Herodotus. Just take a break. Can I have a volunteer to read this one? Somebody want to unmute and read this? This is from Herodotus, a quote about drinking in the Persian Empire. Can I have a volunteer? Anybody got a nice voice they want to unmute and do this for me so I can take a little break? Do I have a volunteer? Just pick on someone?
They are very fond of wine, and no one is allowed to vomit or urinate in the presence of another person.
Thank God.
If an important decision is to be made, they discuss the question when they are drunk, and the following day the master of the house where the discussion was held submits their decision for reconsideration when they are sober. If they still approve it, it is adopted. If not, it is abandoned. Conversely, any decision that they make when they are sober is reconsidered afterwards when they are drunk.
Isn't that mad? Isn't that kind of topsy-turvy? Isn't that what the Megillah talks about the whole time? Everything's upside down, right? The horses that Haman thought he was going to go on, Mordechai was on, and the gallows Haman made for Mordechai, Haman meant to be on. It's for Na'afocha, everything's backwards. And by that's what happened with the king. He was drunk when he had Vashti killed, and the next morning goes, what am I going to do? Right? So it's described. You read this, it's like, that's like the Megillah. That's why we drink, to be like this. Right? This was a Persian cultural thing. Let's look at the next object I want to show you. Not only is it all about wine, there's also, what about women? We've heard about Vashti. Is there much about women in the exhibition? Well, there is. Look at this. Look at this. They've got to go over here, this side of it. Have to go around this little case over here, back round where the Cyrus cylinder is. And let me rotate around again and look over here. There it is. Can I stand closer? Yes. Look over. You can't see it that clearly, but I want to look at this. I'll home in on it. Left a bit. Can you see what is that in the middle there? What are these three things? Can you see? Can I get closer? There we go. What are they? They are, it says women and cosmetics. They are perfume bottles with little women on the side of them. Okay. But there aren't many pictures of women in Persia, it says, but they would shape, mold women. Important for Persian women, so they could beautify themselves in front of their men. Sound familiar to you? Absolutely. It's in the Megillah. How do I get to my screen again here? Oh, it's gone a bit funny, my screen. Can I do that? Sorry, 1 second, guys. It's gone a bit nice. My screen's gone a bit funny. It says closed program waiting to respond. Okay, it's kind of stopped for a second. I think I give it a bit of a headache. Let me
Yeah, Raphi, I think you're a bit frozen yourself. Your image.
I'm really sorry. Let me try and fix that for you.
You can jump out. You can jump out and come back in.
Okay, I'll jump out, come back.
Amazing, guys, to think. We read the Purim story every year. We read the Megillah. We get all animated and excited about the story. And then you go into a museum and the entire thing is present in front of us. The whole image of our Jewish history. And it's there clearly presented. It's very, very cool. Really, really, really cool. Being able to see that.
Right there. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Good. I can't. It's not as clear actually. I'm still having some difficulty. Can I do that? Share screen.
You seem to be in twice.
Yeah, that's weird, isn't it?
Oh no, you're back in just once now.
Good. Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay, so let's go back in, and let me share the screen again.
Raphi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Yes. So look, guys, we took. Oh, that was wrong. I didn't want that. What did I want? Let me share the right thing. New share. That. Let's see if that works. Yes. Okay. So remember I showed you the cosmetics. Look at this. Remember Esther goes to see the king, right? And it says that the women, in preparing for the beauty pageant, would spend 6 months in myrrh, and 6 months in spices, in other kind of perfumes to be in front of the king. But Esther hardly put on anything, just her face. So the cosmetics is what all the others wore, but she didn't. And the question is, why didn't she? And you know why? I'll tell you. When Vashti died, and this is, I'm sorry, I apologize for this, but we're adults here. This is the most horrible text. It's in the Gemara. It's really sick. How did Ahasuerus describe Vashti that night in the party? Here's what he said to the guys. He got up half drunk and he said, "Hey guys, kli she'ani mishtamesh bo, the vessel that I use." It's very horrible language. You know exactly what he means. The vessel that I use, right? Eino bo, that I use inside it. Eino lo madai. It's not Median. It's not a Median vessel. But Lord Parsi, it's not a Persian vessel. Elakasti, it's Babylonian. What? Do you want to see it? And then he drags out Vashti. She's literally a trophy wife. Now, what's he saying? There are Medians there. There are Persians there. There are Babylonians. There's people from all over Persia, right? And now, why is he married to Vashti? Because he conquered Babylon. And just like the English kings would marry their sons off to French princesses, Darius married Xerxes off to Vashti to unify the kingdom. But once Vashti gets killed because he's upset with her, he needs to find a new wife. And the problem is, if she's too Babylonian, that'll annoy the Persians. And if she's too Median, it'll annoy the Medians, right? And if she's too Turkish, it'll enjoy them. So you need a woman who isn't too much of anything. So what did Esther do? She didn't dress up with makeup. She didn't dress up the makeup of any culture. She came in plain. And who was she? Austere. It was hidden. Nobody knew who she was. And that was perfect. You know why? Because they could imprint on her what they wanted. They could make her the Persian princess, the image of Persia. Esther's lack of history and context is what allowed her to become the great queen. And that's what it was all about here. Ahasuerus wanted to reign through power that wasn't forcing on people, but by choice, by enjoyment, by culture. We call it in modern language soft power. This is what he did. One example of this, by the way, is the languages. You know, this whole thing, everybody thinks at the end, he said, every husband can be big in his own house. It's a mistranslation. That's not what it means. The end of chapter 1 says, he sent letters to every province, that every people, according to their language, that every man should have authority in his home. Do you know what that means? Kol ish sorer beveito. That means every local authority could have power in their region and speak in their own language. Ahasuerus allowed people to speak in their own languages. Unlike Babylonians or the Assyrians who made them translate everything, he became multicultural. And every time they send letters in the Megillah, it's in any language. This Rav Eliezer commentary says exactly that. Unlike the other commentators, he said, write in your own language. He's very much allowing people to do things in their own way. That was the cultural difference in Persia, and that's how it controlled it. And that, my friends, do I have the British Museum anymore? Let me see if I can find that. My friends, is what makes, oh, can I do this? Sorry, 1 second. Yes, okay, here we go. British Museum again. There we go. No, that one. Right, okay, good. I can share that with you now. Yes, so what I'm trying to build up to you is an understanding of the kind of culture that they had in Persia. And it was very much a laissez-faire. We'll let you do what you want. As long as you respect the king, you can do what you like. And that's the approach today. More Jews have assimilated from cultural assimilation than from being destroyed. That's what Purim was about. It was about attempting to destroy Jewish people, not their culture, but people, because it was about cultural assimilation. And even without Haman, that's what was going on. So I'm not making this clear. I'll try and be clearer. Right? In times in Jewish history, people have tried to destroy us. But what's destroying Judaism today more than anything else is acculturation. We're becoming like everybody else. And that's what was going on in Persia, by the way. Right? Because the king said, you know what? Drink what you like, dress what you like, cosmetics as you like, write in your own languages, as long as you're part of this people, and you'll be assimilated. Now, one of the last objects I want to show you is this one over here. Very difficult to see. Can you see all these little horses? These are horse-drawn carriages. Why? Because another big thing for Persians was about the royal mail. Okay, let me show you that now. I'll try this again. Oh, sorry about this. Can I do that? Share with you? Yes, I'm trying to share again. Sorry, I don't know why I'm at the college. I should have really good links, but I've got a problem over here. Sorry, guys.
I'm not sure if we could see your video. We could see the museum. I'm not sure if we could see you at the moment.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you, but
could you see the handout now, or still the museum?
We're still in the museum. I mean, I think I am, unless anyone else wants to step in. If they can see something I'm not seeing.
No, can you unshare for me? You can do that. Can you unshare?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Oh, back on. That's good. That's better. Can you press an unshare if we make us co-hosts?
Yeah, I know. I unshared it already.
Oh, it hasn't worked on my screen yet.
Let's see if it works on mine.
I'm really sorry, guys. It's never happened to me before. It must be a slow, because I'm at the college on my own, so it should be strong, I think.
Maybe someone could unmute themselves if what they're seeing on the screen at the moment. Sorry.
Bingo advert.
We can see Raphi, Rabbi Raphi, just his face, and we can see the museum.
Right. So do you see the museum?
Yes.
Not the bingo advert.
No, we've got the bingo. No, we can see the museum.
Oh
Bingo.
no. No, the bingo advert.
Most people can see the bingo advert.
Yeah, I can.
Well,
I'm gonna lock out, lock in again. I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay, fine. You guys do that. Whilst Raphi's coming in, because we only have a couple minutes left. This is probably a good opportunity for me to do a shameless plug for our Purim bingo extravaganza. We already have close to 150 people signed up. Amazing prizes, and it's all free, obviously. And on Thursday night next week, the link to register for you or for anyone who wants to join is in the chat. And you get to win lots of great stuff and just have a lot of good fun celebrating Purim. So please feel free to do so and to enjoy. So let's see if Raphi's back. Raphi, can you speak?
If I can do that, yes. I don't know why it's weird. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm going to get rid of you're here twice for some
Sorry,
reason.
everybody. I've never had this before. This happens sometimes, you know, with our thing. So let me show you on our. Can you all see that handout? I want to show that one actually. I want to show a different one. Can I show you my handout? The PDF one? Yes, here we go. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Good.
yes.
When we were talking about that chariot, this is a nice picture of it. Look at that. A golden little chariot. Right, from the Oxus treasure from Persia, from that period. Why? Because remember I told you it was 10 million square miles, 2 million people? The way that they unified the country was by having a very fast Royal Mail service. Right, described over here. Look at this, right? Herodotus says, nothing mortal travels as fast as the Persian messengers. They'd have a horse along the road and they would be in 7 days, be able to get all the way. Look at this map from Susa, from Shushan, all the way to the edge, to Sardis, the very edge of the empire. And that way they unified the people. They sent letters. And the Megillah, you'll notice, there's loads of letters sent, right? Letters about the king in chapter 1, and then letters about Haman trying to destroy the Jews, and Mordechai trying to save the Jews. It even talks about the kinds of horses. Look at chapter 8, riding on swift horses used in the royal service, bred with royal mares. Ha'ach ta'nim b'nei haramachim. Unique words in the Bible. Why? Because it reflects the way the Persians did it. The way they unified the culture was making it, was having a mail service. They could get the information all over. I don't know if you've seen on Netflix, there's that new movie with Tom Hanks, News of the World. About 5 years after the American Revolution, this general who went around reading the news to unify the country. Fascinating. But I want to finish off, because we're short on time. I'm going to finish off with one final thing, which I really want to show you. And let's try and do it in the museum first, okay? So that you'll see that I'm not making this stuff up. Let's see if I can get into the museum. Let me do the stop. Let's take a risk now, but let's see if I can make this work. Come on. I really want to show you because it's so beautiful. Here we go. Over here. Yep, let me share this with you. And let me show you from the palace itself. So let's show it. There we go. Let me hope this doesn't crash again. Let me pan out, run out of time briefly. So let me go towards the end, the last 5 minutes so you can see it. Let's go over here. And over here is part of the palace in Susa. I can actually show you over here. It's only little bits of stone, but just think how old it is. That palace was there 2,500 years ago, okay? And not only do they have some stone from it, it's in color. I'm scooting on it now. The note here says, this is brickwork from the corridors. That's what it says over here in the palace at Susa. It's still got its color. Can you see the shapes here and the flowers, right? When Esther walked through the corridors, these are the stones that were on the wall of a real palace. And what did it look like? Oh, not again. Can I stop share? Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Well, at least I've shown them to you, and I can now show you my handout, hopefully. Although I'm going to have to go in and out again one more time, Rabbi. I'll come back in and I'll just show the handout. So you've got to talk for 2 minutes.
Okay, so Raphi's come out again, and we're going to just let you know what's going on tomorrow night very quickly. Tomorrow night we have Baroness Roz Altman coming to the community in conversation with Jeff Hartnell on what might Brexit and COVID-19 mean for the economy, investments, and pensions. This is going to be at 8 p.m. The only thing is, I will send you the Zoom information. It's not on this Zoom channel. It's on a different one because it's in conjunction with the Malki Foundation. Anyone who has Facebook, it will be on Facebook, the Zoom information. If not, you just need to register, go on your emails at the Malki Foundation for it. So just to be aware of that going on tomorrow evening as well, 8 p.m.
Okay, good. Okay, let me see if I can do this. I don't want that. No, I want to close that. Can you let me share again, Rabbi?
You should be able to.
Yeah, okay, good. Let's see if I can do this share screen. Yeah, and I'll just stick with this. And remember I told you they dug up the palace? This is what it looks like today. Here's a picture of it over here. This is where the palace is. Can you see? You can just about see the foundations. And so they've done scans of it, and this is what it looks like, aerial view. And when they try to make a mock-up of what it looked like, it would be like this. And let me describe it to you. This is the real palace at Susa. This is their gates. Remember Mordechai sits at the gates and over here's Bigdan and Teresh. That happens over here. And then you have the outer court and the inner court. That's the royal palace where the king was. That was the harem over there. The garden party took place over here. You can actually describe it room by room, right? And in fact, that's what the that's what I've got over. Let me show you. Scroll up a bit to show you. Yeah, that's what's over here, right? Look, it says at the beginning of the Megillah. It says, and they had the party in the courtyard of the garden of the king's palace, b'chatzer ginat bitan hamelach, right? Hamelach, right? The courtyard of the garden of the king's palace. What was it? Was it the courtyard or the garden or in the palace? So look what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, what does that mean, those three words, courtyard, garden, palace? Those who are worthy went to the outer courtyard. Those who are more worthy went into the garden. And those who are really hoi polloi went inside the palace. Or 3, 2, and 13. Look at this. You can actually map out where they went. When I taught this to some primary school teachers, you know what one enterprising teacher did? On their gym floor with sticker tape, they marked out the shape of the palace and did a play with all the rooms as you go. Because what I've done is, I've over here at the end of the handout, and I'll give this to the rabbi, I've gone room by room where the party happened, where the story of the Megillah takes place. And every time it mentions a particular place, an outer court, chatzer, bitan, I've mentioned it. Or lifnei chatzer nashim. Look at this one. When Mordechai goes to check on Esther, remember it says every day he would try and talk to Esther. But she was living in the chatzer beit hanashim, in the courtyard, chapter 2, verse 11, the courtyard of the harem. Where's the courtyard of the harem? Right, well, we know, because look, here is the king's palace over here, and tucked in the back, nice and safe, no one can get to. Number 8 is, what's number 8? 8 is the harem. So that's where Esther was. So if Mordechai wanted to get to, he'd have to walk round the outside of the palace to gate 12, the western palace, and he'd shout out, Esther, Esther, and a eunuch would go, what? High voice for eunuch. What? Please get Esther. And Esther, how you doing? And then he send messages. So we can actually work out room by room where it happened. Isn't that amazing? And later on in the story, when Esther does a private party, look at this. Esther invites the king for a private party, Bet Mishteh, right? That would have been in the king's chambers. Where are the king's chambers? That's the high bit over here. Can you see it's raised number 7? The king's chambers over here. And you know what happened in that party? Finally, the queen says, my king, there's a man trying to destroy my people. And until that point, Ahasuerus had no idea who her people were. He didn't want to know. He wanted Esther to be the symbol of Persia. But finally, she's saying who they are. He goes, well, in that case, I don't want this to get out. I've got to make sure she's happy, Esther. I don't want this to get out. Political. And she goes, and you know, there was a man trying to kill my people. Who is this person? This could be a political outrage for the country. It's him, Haman. And the king is so upset. Do you know what he does? Look at the text. The text says he's so upset, the king, when he hears it's Haman, that what does he do? It says, V'hamelech kam b'chamato, chapter 7, verse 7, kam b'chamato, he got up in his anger, mishteh yain, from the party in the chambers, el ginat habitan, and it went to the palace gardens to calm down. I don't know if you do that. You walk out in your garden during COVID to calm down. So guess what? We could trace his steps, literally. He's in room 7, and he goes to 13, the gardens. So he goes along the corridor here, along here, and out here to calm down. It's a 5-minute walk. Right? Meanwhile, Haman is pleading with the queen, please let me go, please, 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 and jumps on her. And by the time the king comes back, he sees Haman on the queen. You're going to try and rape her too? And then Haman gets taken away and killed. And they hang him, and they make sure that it's all wiped out because they don't want Esther's people to be upset. We've got to keep Esther happy because she's the symbol of the kingdom. And that's why a royal edict is sent out that everybody can, the Jews around the Shushan Empire can fight back. So what's amazing is, and I'll end with this because we've gone over time, is what's the other famous story of a person talking to a king in the Bible? It's Moses and Pharaoh, right? 10 chapters, the 10 plagues, the crossing of the sea, going in, Moses going up in the palace. And you know what? If you read chapter 1 of Exodus all the way to chapter 13, even though Moses sees Pharaoh time and again, 10 plagues and more so, about 12, 13 times, not once does it mention anything about the palace, the front, the back, the inner courtyard, nothing. It just says he went to see him and then he left. But the Megillah, look at this, room by room tells you everything that went on. The palace is part of the story of the Megillah. Why? And you know why. We say it in English, the corridors of power. The story of the Megillah is a political story. How did Esther, A woman in a foreign place used her political power in the corridors of the Persian palace to save the Jewish people. She walked around this palace. You saw those stones. I'm going to try it again earlier to show you that she walked past. That's the Megillah story, how one woman, right, with the help from her cousin Mordechai, managed to save the Jewish people by living inside the corridors of power. And to this day, we have Jews in the corridors of power. Look at the advert that Rav just showed, Rosa Altman. She is in the corridors of power, looking after the interest of the country, but also looking after the interest of the Jewish people. That is the magic of the Megillah, that we have so much of it today available to look at. So to finish off, remember we taught you three things about the setting, that Achashverosh is Xerxes. Book 7 of the Book of Herodotus, you can read all about him. The power structure was much more enticing than previous ones. Speak your own language, Jews. Drink what you want. Do your own religion. And without Haman, it would have assimilated us. But Haman forced a change. And then finally, the palace itself, the corridors of power. And when you go to the British Museum, you can see Achashverosh on his throne. You can see the extent of his kingdom. You can see the cultural norms in which he lived and the drinking and the cosmetics. It's all there in real life. That's what I wanted to show you on this tour. So thank you very much. That was a little taste of what you can see at the British Museum. There's a whole lot more, but we are out of time. So there you go.
Okay, so first of all, a very virtual but fantastic round of applause to Raphi. Really, really, really incredible. Yashikaya. By the way, if anyone's interested in wondering why Raphi kept on cutting in and coming out instead of telling the story straight, he was trying to keep in line with the whole way the Megillah is told. Obviously, we always stop for Haman and have a big noise and disruption, and then have to go on. So, I mean, as you can't get more authentic than your presentations. It is absolutely totally in line with the tempo and motif of the occasions that you bring yourself into. Of course, always making a great impression. You know, some would say that what you've done this evening is quite clever, and I think that would not sell it accurately, because to say it's quite clever means that you were able to find links and to highlight them. Actually, what you did this evening and what you always try to do is you bring as I said in the beginning, you bring Yiddishkeit to life. You live it, and you help and encourage us to live it as well. And I know that's your whole Raison d'etre. That's what you want to do with everything you do in the different ways which you do it. It's just to give us a lens that we can relate to make our Judaism that much richer. And we thank you so much for it. Earlier in the year, when everything was shut down, we turned to you and to LSJS coming into Rosh Hashanah for material and for information, and we had this beautiful Beyonding compilation publication that you created, and I think that there might be something in the works for Pesach as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I really believe. I've described to Rav a little bit about this, but more that, you know, what is our Haggadah? Haggadah is a memory to help us remember going from darkness to light, from slavery to freedom. We do this by rituals, by remembering what happened and moving out of it. So you know what I've tried to write? I've written a exodus from COVID, a recovery lesson through the Haggadah, 7 readings that you can read this year at Seder night, which relate to the story of the Haggadah, and use it. And we use our amazing mitzvot and our traditions to help us come out gradually as we begin with the vaccines to come out of coronavirus, to remember and to learn and to come out stronger and better. That's what our tradition teaches us. We Jews know how to get past things, and therefore we have to look to our sources to do it. So I'm trying to update the Haggadah in that way, and I will make the booklet. It's called, instead of Beyonding, it's called Recovering. And I'm going to produce a version of it and send it to the Rav as a PDF, or he might put it in the mail out. It depends when it comes out, and you'll all get it.
Sorry, Raphi, I mute you back, so please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so you'll get it as a PDF, either in the magazine or as an email from the shul, and you can print it out. And if you want, they're ready to go readings for Seder night, so that you can actually relate the two experiences together. For instance, the 4 sons, 4 children, 4 reactions to
Vaccines.
COVID for 4 children and how they respond, that kind of stuff. There you go.
Brilliant. So we're getting past it without passing over. That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Really, really amazing. Raphi, to thank you once again, and to continue thanking you for all that you and LSGS do for Anglo Jewry and beyond as well. Yashikayach, really fabulous. And looking forward to many more partnerships together.
I'll just mention one thing, for guys out there, because if I can make you read a book and learn this stuff more deeply, even better. Someone actually did a biography of Ahasuerus. Came out 2015. Here it is, Xerxes, A Persian Life. Not cheap, but if you read this book, you know, and knowing the Megillah, your mouth will keep dropping. How many overlaps? Look at this. The first biography of since Herodotus, 2,400 years before. Well, look it up if you want to read your Megillah. And if I can make you burn the midnight oil and learn the Megillah in depth and learn Torah more deeply, then my job is done. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
You can't. You keep the references keep on coming. Unbelievable! Look at that. So good. So amazing. You slip them in. No one else realizes, but just staying. So you are living the story as we speak. Thank you very much. We're just going to. I'll take off for a moment, and just want to conclude with just some thank you, of course, for all of you for continuing to support our events. I greatly appreciate. Hopefully, you've all enjoyed another addition into our educational series. As I mentioned, Rose Altman with Jeff Hartnell will be tomorrow evening. Make sure you realize it's on the same Zoom, and it's at 8 p.m. We also have coming up as well the Hartzmere rabbis and Rebbitzins Power Hour that will be taking place next week, but really Purim is on the horizon now. You have until the beginning of next week to register for in-person in Shul Megillah or drive-ins, or of course as well on Zoom, and also, as I said, 8:30 on Thursday, on Purim evening, a really fun, enjoyable bingo evening, just to enjoy Purim. We have to allow ourselves to enjoy things, to have a good time. You will have your bingo cards either delivered to you, or you could pick up in a COVID safe way. And it's, obviously you can win some prizes, but it's more just about having some fun together, enjoying yourselves. But you do need to register ahead of time. So please, as I put in the link already into the chat, to make sure that you get a chance to do that. And looking forward to just enjoying some nice experiences with everyone. So once again, thank you all for attending. Thank you very much for keeping our community going from strength to strength, and wishing everyone a pleasant evening and a very safe drive home. Have a good night, everyone.